Hello, Kelsey here, founder of Como. I am delighted to be on here today with Angie Lynn. She is one of our incredible super moms. Her and her son Connor have just graduated from our flagship program, which seems like it went by like that. And I'm so excited Angie came on today. Her story is, I know it'll resonate with a lot of you, and it's a real testament to what is possible when our kids have the chance to discover and use tools for learning and life success. So Angie, thank you for coming on with us. I am going to pass it over to you if you can tell us a bit about yourself, about Connor, about where he's at with his educational journey, kind of set the scene for us.
Sure. And thanks for having us on. In fact, I listened to quite a few of these as we were going through the process and doing a little research. My son Connor is in the 8th grade, and actually he's a decent student. You're thinking, well, why would you then work with Como or seek it out? He was having problems in one area, in one subject, math, which was in a freshman level class. And over the years, I had tried to work with him on different study habits and getting organized, and talk to him about using a planner, asked him to pick out a planner, so that he would feel comfortable, and then would follow up with him daily or multiple times daily as far as, what do you have coming up? Are you using your planner? Did you write that down? And not only school information, but things that are outside of school, because he had some goals as far as athletics are concerned. None of this was able to resonate with him on a continued basis. So it would work for a week. He would use his planner for a week and then he wouldn't, or he would let me know sometimes if he had a test coming up, and I would talk to him about studying for the test, maybe a little bit each day so that you're not cramming at the end or making note cards, because I'm old school. And again, he would see the success if he did that one time because I harped on him, but then it wasn't really a habit that he picked up. So I was looking for a math tutor, and talking with some parents of Connor's friends. They were also having problems in math as well. So I was looking for a math tutor, and literally, I think I clicked on Facebook, and I never do that. I clicked on a Facebook ad because and it took me to the Como site, and I was looking at it and I'm like, okay, this is really interesting as far as the 5 principles. And I started listening to a little bit more. It wasn't until Connor said something that I said, this is it, and we've got to do this. He asked me, Mom, is this what high school is going to be like? Meaning he's taking this high school math class. He's not understanding the concepts. He's talked with the teacher, but he hasn't really been able to, in my opinion, maybe make any headway. And I put that more on him than the teacher. And that's when it clicked for me that, oh, he's concerned about going into high school. And, I had that fear as well, and always, concerned about, am I going to be able to keep up, et cetera, when I was in school and had to work really hard. And there's nothing with working really hard, but I wanted him to feel confident going into high school, that he can do the work and that he can handle it. And I knew he didn't have the study skills to enter high school and then hopefully, go on to college or pursue a career. And I was not able to successfully teach him and get him to do those things. So when I, dug a little deeper and started listening to some of the outcomes on the student side and then on the parent side, I told my husband, I said, we've got to do this. This is an investment in our child and his future. And it will hopefully also help our relationship, because that's when, Connor and I get along really well. But there is obviously tension, and when we argue when it comes to school and me reminding him and harping on him. So that was the reason why we jumped in with 2 feet and scheduled the intake call.
That's Angie, that's awesome background. Thank you so much for that context. I think even just there alone, you've highlighted a few things I kind of want to just like unpack a little bit of. And by the way, you guys, the intake call Angie referred to, that is the call that you're invited to book for you and your child. It is our learning skills assessment, and we will drop the link. You can book that call for yourself and your child. If there are spots left, we hold them every single week. They're free. And yeah, anyway, I'll let Angie tell you more about it a bit later. But Angie, let's kind of home in here on a couple of the things you shared. Number one, I love kind of how you bridged from my kid needs help with math. He's struggling with math. He's saying he's not understanding. Can you speak a bit more about, because a lot of families reach out to us, a lot of parents being like, well, my kid really only needs help with English, or my kid only really needs help with chemistry. And at this stage, because I've been doing this for so long, I'm like, I can about guarantee you that they need help with skills in general to manage and thrive in all of their classes. But can you kind of walk through that process of your own realizing of like, it's maybe not just math. Like there could be something deeper here. Like you mentioned those study skills. How did you kind of go from he only needs math help into, he might need more like holistic skills for math, but also for other subjects?
I think because in the years leading up, and I remember all the way back into fourth and fifth grade, which were really difficult at the school that Connor attended. And he had more work in fourth and fifth grade and had to use more study skills, in my opinions, in fourth and fifth grade than in sixth. And then, well, seventh grade was kind of just very different, obviously, for everyone last year. So he was doing well and he was finding success in most of his classes. But in the back of my mind, I knew he doesn't know how to study. He is doing the work. He's checking it off. He's a bright kid. But when he gets into high school and college, in the back of my mind, I knew he did not have those skills as far as how do I organize myself, my schoolwork, and how do I learn? I felt like it was more memorization. I'm checking it off, school, checking off the box. I'm doing fine. I'm doing great because he's a bright kid. But at some point that's going to turn. And that's what I felt like with math. That was showing him there's something else. It's going to get harder. It's going to get tougher. So that made me take a step back, kind of putting those two things together. When he said, is this how it's going to be in high school? That's when I connected. You're having trouble in math, and I could see some of the issues he was having were more on his side, rushing through things or not paying enough attention. But I knew that when I connected that having trouble in math and is this how things are going to be in high school, I said, you know what, we need more than just math help, because I'm not sure now everything is done online. You don't see papers or things that your kids write because everything is done online. I have no idea what his essay writing skills are. I don't know what essays he's writing or has to write. So because everything is online and he gets a lot of his work done in school. So there's not homework and he doesn't want me over his shoulder anyway.
An eighth grader not wanting you over his shoulder, Angie, shocking. That's that's so, I love that insight so much. So it really sounds like math was more or less the microcosm of that aha moment of like, this is everything else is getting harder. And I think that's actually, that unto itself is pure gold, truly, because the number of families I speak with when their kids are in grade 11, grade 12, or often in university, where it is reacting to, oh my God, my kid has been in school now struggling and not knowing how to do their best for months or years, as opposed to what you're sharing. And like, I hope whoever is watching this, if your kids are in middle school or early high school, that timing, it's never too late to learn how to learn. Your kid can be 20 years old and learn how to learn, and it's a beautiful thing. But that preemptive of let's not wait until it gets bad, because inevitably things will get harder. Like it's not like I hope things will be okay. Things will get harder. And if they're not prepared, how do they expect to succeed, I suppose, without sort of a plan in place? And I think a lot of families that I've talked to, at least, they just assume that it'll be okay. And Angie, from what I'm hearing, that you are assuming like, oh no, it's probably going to be a problem and we should tackle it. Is that accurate?
Definitely. I knew it in the back of my mind always, just the study skills weren't there and he's checking the box. And I didn't know how to get through to him. I tried my old school ways and it didn't resonate with him. Plus, I'm his mom. What do I know? at this point in life. So um, it 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 almost it was like a pit in my stomach, just knowing in the back of my mind that there's going to be a struggle ahead. We have 3 kids. My husband works, I work, and there was already that tension and that conflict that, like I said, we have a really good relationship and I want to maintain that relationship going into some critical years ahead. So arguing about school and assignments and me trying to keep up with his assignments, and I have to ask, or I guess, I can look online and see what he has, but I also, he needs to be a responsible adult and handle those things on his own. And I feel like the earlier he can learn that, to take responsibility and own that, the more that if he starts practicing that now, it won't be such a shock then as things get more difficult and harder. He'll be able to handle those hopefully with ease, and feel confident.
Totally. And that sort of preemptive capacity building is so key. I just want to so flag that it's so important. And then the other interesting thing, Angie, about your experience here is that it's not like Connor, to your point, it's almost like he could be, I feel like, a poster child for smart kid getting by because he's really bright. He's good at school, if you want to put it that way. Like he's being taught to, he's more or less, like you said, ticking that box. He's getting the stuff that he needs to more or less off his plate. But he wasn't, failing a bunch of classes or at risk of, drop out or stuff like that. So I'm curious from Connor's perspective, and I hope Connor will actually come on and talk to me about this. I haven't asked him yet, but that's a later thing. But from what you saw, like, was he, aside from that math specific piece, was he feeling like there was some struggle? Like, was he feeling like that tension, even with you that you just described, was a problem? Or was he feeling like things were overall going pretty well?
On the school front, as far as his grades are concerned, things are going well. Math is the only issue.
Okay.
But as far as, our relationship, he's in tune to that. And the struggle comes between Connor and me rather than Connor and Tim, my husband, his dad. Because I'm the intense one. I'm the parent who's here more and keep up with things, whereas Tim's more laid back. So that struggle was really with us, and I saw that as being kind of a deterrent as far as our trust and our communication. And so I wanted to give him I'll say the power, so to speak, but really just the independence of owning his own responsibilities for school, succeeding with them, and putting some things into practice that he can use and kind of what I don't want to say perfect, but work on now, so that they are just natural as things become more difficult, and as he progresses through high school and then maybe college.
Yeah, it's that. Yeah, it's not about perfecting, because I think you're absolutely right. We're all lifelong learners, but it's practice, right? Like the more he's practicing, the more he's going to feel confident and more capable as stuff gets harder. So I love, the practice piece, just have more runway to practice it. So Angie, had you guys tried, I don't know if you ended up getting him a math tutor at any point kind of in that stage, or if you had tried any other, coaching or things like that. Like, was he open to that? Was he like, I don't want anything to do with that? Like, how did you initially approach this problem, aside from the Facebook ad you saw? Maybe that came first. You'll tell us.
So I was looking for math tutors, and I think I had probably done a search or something online. I had talked with other people about different math tutors they use. Finding time within the schedule was interesting. So I was trying to figure out, do I hire someone face to face? Plus, we're in the middle of a pandemic at the time, or do we try to do something online when you can log on at any point and someone's there to help? So I was trying to figure out what would be the best way for him, from a scheduling standpoint, because I know he wasn't excited about that idea, because to him, that's just more work. That's more time that he has to spend working rather than playing. He loves to play, loves to be outside. So even at the age of 14, just being outside, basketball, golf, whatever it is. So approaching it with him was very different. I mean, we had talked about a math tutor, but I told him, I said, listen, come upon something and I want you to watch a couple of videos. He didn't even want to do that. But he's fairly compliant, and he's like, okay, I'll do that. And he watched some videos and he was like, oh yeah, it sounds, interesting. But I also knew that he was just saying that because he's a pleaser. So he wasn't that excited about it. And not to jump ahead, he did the intake call and he was like, it's going to take how long? And, he didn't want to do it, but he did it. And afterwards, and I will say, the intake call was really helpful because they really dive deep into things. It's not just, oh, you're automatically going to be part of this program. At least, and Kelsey, you can tell me if I'm wrong. This was, let's see if this is the right fit. Because also, I think Connor, the middle schoolers, for example, we have a son who's in the 6th grade. I wouldn't put him in this at this point because of who he is and where he's at developmentally. He will go through this, but we're going to wait until probably he's in the 8th grade and see where he's at from a development standpoint. Anyway, sorry, going back to Connor and the intake call, it was just really thorough, and it wasn't, hey, you're automatically in. It's like, let's see if this is the right fit.
You're spot on. I'm so happy you say that, because I feel like I tell families that, where it's like, we're not trying to just like throw stuff at you to be like, take what we have. It really is, we're professional educators. It really is a question of a diagnostic of like, let's try to get really clear on the extent and nature of the skills deficit at play. Skills are our wheelhouse. That's our specialty. And if we can help, then that's when we talk about what we do. And we usually get really excited about it because we're like, hey, we can actually bridge the skills deficit and fix a bunch of problems. But if we can't help, then, we always try to be like, there's other resources. And also to your point, Angie, a lot of like Connor eventually came around, and I'm going to ask you about that in a second, because I know he wasn't like thrilled. And you guys listen, like, and Angie, I will not take offense. We run a program for school, like, and we've worked with teens for, a lot of years now. I get it. I'm used to it. Most of our kids do not show up with bells on wanting to be there. But the kind of one of the main criteria is like, they have to be open, because if they are not open to learning new things, and I say this all the time, it's one of the reasons traditional tutoring often falls short. Like, you can have the best teacher in the world, you can have the best tutor in the world, but if the student isn't open to learning, if they are not open to learning how to learn, then it doesn't really matter what's coming at them. Right. So that openness on behalf of the student is so critical. So with Connor, given that, he like reluctantly came along for this, I suppose, did the intake, what was his, how did he buy in essentially? Like, was he bought off like right after the call? Was he like, did it take some talking to? Like, what did you observe for that?
So he told me after the call, yeah, this sounds interesting. Okay, yeah, I'll do it. And then he told Tim later on, I really don't want to do this, but I know mom wants me to do it. So obviously I sat down and talked with him, and I said, you've got to be honest with us. I said, let's look at what the different skills that this program is kind of founded upon and based upon. Let's look at where you're struggling and how this may be able to help you. And do you want to feel more confident going into freshman year? And that's really what I based our conversation on, is the fact that he wasn't feeling comfortable and he had a nervousness about going into becoming a freshman basically in August. So he said, okay, I will do it. And we told him, what you put into it is what you're going to get out of it. And it's 8 weeks, and you are going to dedicate the time to it. And I will say, he started literally the same week. He had no activities after school prior to this. And then all of a sudden the same week, he had basketball every day after school, confirmation, which was just more intense on the weekend, as far as spending a little bit more time at church. And then also he had Como on top of everything. So that was a big change for him. But he did buy into it. And we said, listen, this is an investment in you as a person, not just tutoring. This is an investment so that you feel better in high school and college. And we told him that there are some people in college who are doing this. And we said, we don't want you to get to the point where you need this because you're failing. And not saying that you're going to fail, but we want you to feel confident going into high school and that you have the skills, because we know you have the brains, but it's just developing those skills to get the work done. And as you all say, get the work done, plan it out so that you can have the time to do what you want to do.
Yeah, that's Angie, that's such fantastic insight for framing that kind of that buy-in, because it's on the one hand, it's very fact-based. It's like, I love what you said about let's literally look at what this is going to do, right? And map it out into basically where he's at in his journey based on what he has shared, like his own perspective, just using that as that anchor point because it's his. And even what you said before about taking ownership, it has to start with them. It cannot come from you. It cannot come from us. Like it has to be, I almost picture like just right now, like flaming, like a very small flame, but really like winding it up so that it grows a bit brighter. And then they can just, they're off to the races. And I also want to highlight something you shared, Angie. There is so often with students and parents, which is always a bit surprising to me, but there can be this equation of like, you're smart, so you shouldn't need coaching or support or whatever. And I just love what you highlighted is like, you can be the smartest person in the world. It doesn't mean that you have a particular skill, right? Like it's the two seem to be equated, but they're not. And we use sports analogies a lot with our kids of like, you could be the best, you could be so strong. It doesn't mean you can play basketball, or it doesn't mean you can go like lift weights and do like Olympic lifting. Like if you don't have the technique or the skills, it doesn't translate. So I just wanted to highlight that because I think it's so important. I think that holds a lot of people back from wanting to get help because they're like, well, but I should be smart enough. It's like, you're not an island.
We all need help.
We all need help. There we go. I'll clip that. We all need help.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. So let's talk about his learning journey. So he buys in, he's coming into it with a lot more on his plate than it sounds like he had before. Angie, what did you observe? Like, what did you see for him as he started to learn and gain exposure to different tools, different skills? Tell us some of the things that you really noticed that made a difference for him.
Well, one of the first things that Nicole, who was his coach, that's what I call her, she worked with him at the very first meeting, I want to say. And of course, let me back up. There are modules that the students do on their own. And then there are the meetings where they come together and then they talk and use those modules and what they learn and put everything into practice. As far as I did not sit in on those meetings, but that's what I gathered. So correct me if I'm wrong.
Got it. You got it.
And one of the first things was creating a Google Calendar and scheduling, creating a calendar for each class and really blocking out the time. And just that skill and that organization, I was thrilled as far as how he was going to budget and use his time and then sticking to that. That was the very first thing. And the fact that he did that, and what helped were those calls, those check-ins, and the emails. How is this going? Have you done your weekly check plan, do, reflect? I mean, there's a lot of other things, but that was the first thing that really stuck out and helped him, especially as he had all those different things going on at once.
That's a huge one. Yeah, the calendar. I love that you highlighted that. It is, we start with it for a reason because we feel like it's ground zero, like you can learn how to take notes and how to study and how to read effectively for comprehension and retention and how to take tests. Those are all skills and strategies we teach. But if you're not actively and consistently carving out the time and the space to do those things, then it's still very stressful. And it's not going to work as much. So that foundation. So I also have a question for you, Angie. What do you think? Because you had mentioned before when you were, introducing tools and use the planner, things like this, that he might try something, but it wouldn't necessarily stick. What was it? Was it the type of calendar itself? Do you think it was the accountability? What was it, do you think, that actually led to him actually using it and following through? I'm going to guess it's not 100%, but more often than not, actually kind of incorporating it into his weekly routine.
I think it was, I want to say the accountability, and I can, 2020 hindsight, he is now just graduated from the class, and we have sat down and talked about goals and what's going to happen from this point forward. And he did express that was one of the things he was a little concerned about, is that if he doesn't have that accountability, will he continue to use those skills and those action plans? So I would say a lot of it was the accountability, especially at first, but then it does become habit because they are organizing their day, they're organizing their week. So he scheduled time I think he did it on Sundays, to look at his week and to plan everything out as far as his calendar was concerned. So I want to say accountability. And then I will say just the fact that it was working for him and he saw that working, that played into it more.
I love that. And I'm also just thinking, especially, going back to what you said about being able to practice and having some runway, because think about, if I'm just thinking, if I had 4 years where I was practicing something weekly or daily, 4 years from now, I would be a magician at it. But the fact that we wanted essentially to get to a point where for Connor, and I don't know if he's specifically there yet, because you guys, 8 weeks, you can get a lot done in 8 weeks, and we build out that foundation in 8 weeks. It's very solid, it's very strong, but the practice piece afterwards is critical for locking it in, right? And for making it habit to the point where it wouldn't cross his mind to not do it. And that's where, it's second, it's in, and it's just a part of his normal. And it's not about, should I do this or should I not? It's like brushing your teeth. You just wouldn't think not to.
Unless you're an 8th grade boy.
Yeah, maybe not the best analogy for our target audience right now. But yeah, that's so funny. That's true. Okay, cool. I love that. And other than the calendar, was there anything that you observed that for him, for learning, because I think the big thing with Connor, again, it wasn't about it's not like he was getting Fs and then you wanted him to be getting, passing grades, but that confidence piece, was there anything that he learned or that you observed that, again, just moved the needle for him, that you would highlight as hey, struggling teens, you should have, these 2 or 3 things?
There were a couple things. So and these are things that I could observe, the note taking and learning how to take notes. And then the consolidations, which are 2 different things you'll probably have to describe. Just the way that was set up so that they take notes and then and he would do the consolidations, that would help him continuously study for a test, so that he's not cramming the night before a test and just trying to memorize all this information. Hopefully he's more understanding it because he's absorbing it as he goes, rather than just checking the box. So that was definitely one thing.
That's huge. My doorbell is ringing. I never get people at my door. I'm so sorry, Angie. I'm just going to pause real quick.
No, go ahead.
Right back. You guys, I'll be right back. I'm just going to pause. Sorry. We're back. Impromptu delivery on my end. Sorry. So Angie, you had just shared about the note-taking and consolidations. I'll speak super briefly to that. It's such a big one. You guys, note-taking, self-explanatory. Of a lot of kids don't want to take notes, and just helping them understand how it actually is an anchor point. It facilitates focus, productivity. It helps them feel better about learning as opposed to just feeling bored of doing stuff. Then the other thing, the consolidations, outside of whatever your kids are assigned at school, we always tell them, you really only got to do one thing, at least in middle school and high school. Each week, towards the end of the week, for each class, you literally consolidate your different sources of information of what you learned that week. And then you summarize it more or less, but it's critical engagement with maybe a textbook reading, a handout, maybe you got a quiz back. And it's synthesizing that information, putting it together. It's a weekly activity, and it is basically, it's studying, it's learning, and it is incredible with retention, test taking, etc. So I love, anyway, that's a fantastic one to highlight. And Angie, would you say, was he resistant at all to any of this, or was he open to using it, to learning it, and to doing it?
He was, I'll say, resistant because he complained, as any teen does. It was something he felt was, at the time, was extra, that would take more time. He kept saying, but it takes so much time.
Mhm.
He was talking about the calls. He was talking, Como takes so much time because he was dedicating a good 4 hours a week to the calls and then also the modules outside of that. And 8 weeks to a kid is a lifetime, or at least to Connor. Here I'm like, 8 weeks is nothing. And if you can develop and start developing these skills and have a great foundation in 8 weeks and then just take off from there, then that's amazing. So he was definitely resistant, but there was that accountability in place on the calls. And I will say, Nicole approached this always in such a great way. You always talk about the wins first and really setting kids up and to feel confident and say, what did we accomplish, this week or in this area? I think, and then mapping out some goals for the next week, or, so it's not shaming them because they didn't do something. It's always uplifting, and as far as you've developed another skill, you've taken another step. Did you take the full step? Maybe not, but you've made progress. So let's keep moving forward on that progress. So I really appreciated how it's set up to be a very positive experience, not negative, I should say, as I said.
I'm so glad that you said that. That is 100% how it is set up. But it's also, we definitely want them to have a positive experience, but also, Angie, it's so like for him to learn, like I love the idea what you just shared. I'm just picturing Connor, possibly modeling out or practicing that, when things get hard, that ability to be like, well, look, I still did good, and to not catastrophize. And like, that's really at the root of a lot of resilience too, is to be able to recognize that bigger perspective of like, no, I've done things, I've come further. So I love that you got that out of it. And now I know I'm mindful of our time together, but Angie, I have to ask you as the parent, what was your, outside of what you observed with Connor, anything to share? We have a lot of moms who are going to be listening to this, like anything to share for your own experience as a mom going through this, stepping back and observing what you've just described. What was that like for you?
It was amazing. And I will say I have so many examples. And one thing, kind of even before I get to that, I think another example that just floored me was he had to write an email to one of his teachers. And it involved Como. There was a basketball game that he really wanted to go to. It was the last basketball game of the season, and it's a Wake Forest game. We live in Winston-Salem. Hopefully I can say that. And he's a huge fan, and he'd already missed multiple basketball games because they conflicted with the Como calls. And he said he just automatically, I'll say growth mindset is an area that we all will continue to work on. But he's like, oh, I'm going to miss the game that starts at 9:00 at night on a Wednesday night. And Tim said, well, Connor said, I have this call, it's not going to be over in time, et cetera. And Tim said, well, we've got 2 weeks here. Could you email Nicole and ask, if you can shift some things around on the call so that your portion will be done, in time for you to make the game. You're not skipping the call. You're not getting out early as far as, you're still going to do all the work. But, let's think about some solutions to this or possibilities. So he wrote her an email, and Tim handled, all that discussion. And I got a copy of the email when Nicole replied. And I said, Tim, you wrote that email, didn't you? And he said, no. And I said, well, then you sat next to him and told him or like revised it for him, because that's not our son. I don't know who wrote that email. And he said, no, I'm seeing it the first time that you are. And I said, I work with graduate students in business, and they don't write emails like that.
I need to see this email.
I was floored. I'll send it to you. I was floored. And I'm not like tooting my own kid's horn. I asked him, I said, because I've seen his emails before and to teachers. And I said, Connor, how did you write this? And he said, we just happened, communicate. I was on the communication module and just happened to watch a 5-minute video on how to write an email. And then that came out of it. And I was like, well, I'm going to use this as an example. I forwarded it to my boss and said, hey, students did this. Why aren't our students doing this? So that was just a big aha moment as far as seeing something in practice, even outside of studying, and what we wanted to academically accomplish. His maturity and the trust, I will say now, between us has increased. We give him more freedom because he has shown us that he can be responsible with his schoolwork, with his calendaring, and that he's doing things now on his own. Number one, I don't ask him about school. We have our terms of engagement conversations once a week. We go over academics, social activities or co-curricular activities, what he wants to accomplish. It's just a great framework. And we talk about not just what he wants to accomplish maybe in that week, but what are your goals for the rest of the year, so that we back up then and figure out how to reach those goals. And then it's up to him. We've outlined how to reach those goals. It's something we do together, but then it's up to him, and he owns it. So there's been a huge jump in maturity from just what this program has done, and his confidence as well. I saw a different kid, and not that like I said, he was doing fine in school. He was struggling in math, but I don't hear the complaints anymore about math and the teacher. He was complaining about the teacher and blaming the teacher. He now takes that responsibility, and his math grade has improved. He's not a rock star in math, but he has seen how his grade has jumped. And he has taken that ownership, like I said, because he's not complaining, he's not blaming the teacher, she's not teaching this or that. So it's been overall a huge jump in maturity, I feel like, and growth.
That's awesome, Angie. All of that. I'm still hung up a little bit on the email because it's just such a great example. And it's so funny because we have a little training on email etiquette, and we have templates. It's like, this is how you communicate. And that's just such a great example. But even everything else you shared, like I wish I could give him like double high fives, which he would probably think is so lame, but like he really showed up for himself. Like, that's just everything you're saying. It's like he really took to it in a way for him to step into what he had shared with you previously, what he had shared with us, I guess, on the initial call, of like what he wanted. And I just think that he deserves such props, and such commendation for having that and for being willing to lean in. Because at the end of the day, I think like that is probably the crux of any sort of change that we can create, is like, are we willing to actually lean in for ourselves to create it? And he's done that, and it's so amazing. Angie, wow. Thank you so much. I do have just a couple final questions for you. Would you have what would be your advice for parents who are currently watching their kids struggle, or feeling not confident, or kind of going through some of the similar things that you shared, based on your experience? What's like the top one or two things that you would tell them?
I would say trust the process. Our situation is a little different, but Connor would we would praise him throughout the process and tell him how much we appreciate him buying into it and doing it for himself. Because he would give us examples maybe of kids who didn't do as much as him necessarily, but they were still improving, and so you've got to trust the process. And I think any steps towards what a parent may call improvement, towards independence, towards owning their not just their academic career, but you even talk about how things can apply to their career beyond academics, if they're at that point, or you've even mentioned it to Connor as far as what you want to do in the future. So I think trusting the process and letting it work, and trying to stay hands off, which is really hard, but just sticking it out.
And Angie, I think congratulations to you too, because you did a wonderful job of all of that, as far as like, kind of letting him have his own journey and trusting the process, like you said. So I think there were definitely multiple parties. I'm assuming Tim did the same. I know I didn't get to spend as much time with him, but for what you shared, it's some laid backness to begin with.
Yeah, he's definitely more laid back. I'm the intense one. So, and I would also join the parent calls. They're really helpful as well. I always had a meeting like scheduled right at the time, but I would even jump in late if I could, because it really just helps listening to maybe what some other people are going through, and how that maybe applies to your situation, or ways to avoid that, or it's always helpful advice.
That's awesome. Well, Angie, listen, thank you so much for taking the time. I'm pretty sure we're on your lunch hour now or morning now, but thank you for taking the time to share your story. I know it's going to be immensely helpful for so many families. We really appreciate it. Any moms or dads watching, if you would like to book a call, we will have the link to do so. It's that intake Angie was referring to. It is with you, it's with your kid, and we get real deep and real honest about where they're at, where they want to be, and how we can bridge that if we can help. And then if we can, we literally try to make exactly what they want come true for themselves, in as fun a way as possible as you can with the program with School and Skill Building. Okay, Angie, thank you again. Everybody else, we will see you on our next interview. That is it for tonight. Take care, guys. Bye.